just like you. 我和你一样。
We're just like you.
我是西格木团。
I'm just like you.
I am just like you.
We are just like you. Soy como tú. I'm just like you.
I'm just like you. I am.
After my son Jacob was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, I decided to start sharing stories and show how we are all more alike than different. Because I feel like when we focus in on what we have in common, we break down those barriers, we break down those stigmas, we break down those walls, and we focus on a human being. We focus on a person, and that's where I feel a friendship can begin. So I began Project Just Like You, and this year we've started a new initiative called Movement Monday. And this is where we have an interview on Monday evenings, and we interview somebody we feel is making a difference in the disability world. We have excuse me. Sorry about that. So tonight we are interviewing, we have on Chris Barcomb, and we are so excited to have him. Before we begin, asking first off for you to share this with your friends so they know what you're watching and for them to participate. We are all also asking for to consider donating to Project Just Like You. These shows are made possible through your donations. Please tell us where you're from tonight, where you're watching. We'd love to know. We'll give you a shout out. One lucky winner tonight will win a Target gift card for asking a question live. We also want to thank Fiat Media for producing our shows. You can check out Fiat Media at fiatministrynetwork.tv. And tonight, except we have Chris Barcomb. Chris Barcomb is the writer/creator of all ages comic book series, The Amazing Adventure of Superior Sam. Superior Sam is an amputee superhero showing people what it is like to be different while taking on the challenges of protecting his school. Chris is a retired police officer, amputee himself, avid comic book collector, and a big Captain America fan. And I think you will see that when you see his background on his wall. So we want to welcome Chris tonight. Chris, we are so excited to have you as part of our show. How are you doing?
I'm good. Hi, Molly. So
Hi.
I'm well. I'm up a little later than usual, that's for sure. So
Yeah. I know. Yes. Right after I have these interviews, I go straight to bed because I'm zonked out. I normally am asleep too by this time.
That's where I'll be as soon as I'm done.
There you go. That's right. Well, we're glad that you are spending your evening with us tonight, Chris.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. Well, thank you for being here. We're just so thrilled to have you here. So, Chris, I want to dive into your journey and what inspired you to write the series Superior Sam.
So after I had gotten hurt and I had left the police department, there was a period where my retirement hadn't started yet, and I was still kind of just working on the side and everything, and I was teaching in an after-school program. And one of the kids that I was teaching, that I had taught for the 2 years that I had done this, he was on the spectrum, and he was a great visual learner, but communication-wise, he didn't understand a lot. So he could do all of the goals set for him by reading the directions and things like that. And what ended up happening is when the decision to do my amputation surgery came up, he didn't understand why I was leaving. So I tried to find a book for him, and I couldn't find a book that he could understand. I found medical journals and I found autobiographies, biographies, but I didn't find a book for a child to explain amputation. So I decided that I would write a book kind of explaining what I was going to go through. And granted, I don't think he's ever seen it. You know, I told my old bosses like I had done this and they know and everything, but I don't know if he's ever seen it. But that was the reason that I wrote it, was so I could explain to him what was going on. And then I just kept writing because I had these stories that I wanted to tell to try to make a difference and to highlight other things as well still.
I love that. So it was inspired by, or it was inspired by a person who had autism.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, that's something that's dear to my heart because of my own son, Jacob. And you started writing this to make a difference. Is that right?
I did, yes. I wanted to be able to explain it to him, but I also wanted to be able to explain it to other children and to adults, whether they liked comics or not. I just wanted a quick way for them to kind of understand. Now, I don't get into the details about the different types of amputees. I do, like in the next issue, we do meet a new amputee.
Oh, exciting.
He's a double amputee. And he was born without limbs, but like I didn't get into the difference between being born and like trauma. In Sam's case, because it was my case, it's a trauma. So there's an accident that leads to him being an amputee.
Okay, excellent. And so how has this accident of becoming an amputee, how has this impacted your life? I mean, how has this?
Well, this has been quite an ordeal. I got hurt in November 2011. Mm-hmm. I started having surgeries the following year trying to correct the injury. And then, you know, I had joined the police department in 2007 that I worked for. And by 2012, I was leaving the department that summer to go have spinal cord surgeries because they couldn't fix my ankle anymore. And then I subsequently retired 2013, which was retroactive to, you know, when you turn the paperwork in. But I still try to claim that extra few months. But sure. I mean, I've had, you know, at one point I was telling somebody I had 5 surgeries and I was averaging 1 surgery every, 6 months. And it became very difficult for, my relationships. I lost a lot of friends when this accident happened because I just wasn't as active as I once was. Mm-hmm. And, in law enforcement, unfortunately, it's a tough job. And when you're the injured guy, you don't want your coworkers, they don't want to you're like a black sheep in a way. It's not that they don't like you. It's they don't need that reminder before they go out to do the job that something like this can happen to them. So really even though I'm really good friends with a lot of my coworkers still, and I still go visit my police department, my police career kind of shifted in that avenue as well because I didn't talk to everybody and things like that. But it was a lot, I was 27 when I got hurt. I'm 33 now. Okay. I've had 9 major surgeries. Mm-hmm. Like I said, about 1 every 6 months. I'm really excited when I don't have to go to the hospital for something. I still see my doctors monthly, at least my prosthetist who works on my leg. Because with my nerve problem, they monitor it all the time. But a lot of my schedule is devoted to going to the doctors and staying up, making sure I'm not getting hurt and things like that. Mm-hmm. But it was a lot of change too. I went from playing, going to the gym 7 days a week, twice a day, being a full-time police officer. I played competitive paintball on the side to I could barely walk at some points to not even being able to leave my couch or my bed some days. Mm-hmm. So it was a huge change for me. It was a complete 180.
Sure. Wow. I can only imagine what that was like. Now, have you connected with other people, Chris, who are amputees as well, or do they have any support groups for?
They do. There's a support group in my area. My prosthetist office has a support group that comes out of it, and that's in Charlottesville. I've had the chance to meet a lot of different amputees. Actually, when I got hurt and I knew I was going to lose my leg, I started going back to the gym. I finally got a doctor to force the point of letting me go to the gym to lose the weight to get in better shape. And one of the gentlemen I met at the gym, his son was going to be an amputee. And we actually have the same name. We have the same foot as amputated. We have the same doctor, and he was only 2 months ahead of me.
Oh my goodness.
So I was actually able to get a lot of information from him, and we became friends that way.
That's
but
excellent.
I had met other amputees, and I had interesting interactions with them because I knew for a long time this was going to happen. They gave me an 8 to 10 year prognosis before my leg would have to be amputated. I just chose not to wait that long. So I was trying to talk to amputees, and sometimes I got the "you're crazy," or I got the "I would never do that," or I got completely just shut off. Like they wouldn't talk to me at all. They didn't want to answer questions. And I was just trying to find out things. And, you know, I spent a lot of time telling people that it was kind of embarrassing because I just wanted knowledge, so I knew what I was going to have to deal with and everything. And then once I lost the leg, everybody that was an amputee started talking to me and giving me advice and input. And, you know, that was a whole different thing. But I've met a lot of amputees. When I go around and I do shows and things, if I see an amputee, I kind of call them out.
Yeah.
I'm like, hey, we were actually just in Northern Virginia the other day. We were up at IKEA, and I saw a guy, and I felt bad because I didn't want him to think I was staring, but I could see he was an amputee, and I just wanted to know if he was a below the knee or an above the knee amputee, and I couldn't see by the way he was in his wheelchair. And then finally I just walked up and I was like, hey, I didn't want you to think I was staring. I just wanted to know if you were an amputee. You know, I am as well. And, you know, we got to talking for a few minutes and everything. So
excellent.
And I actually I help out at a amputee summer camp. This is the first year I'll be a counselor, but I was a guest a year and a half ago. I went up for the day and I got to spend it with the kids and everything. So
that's exciting, Chris. Now, where is the amputee camp?
This is through a company called Adventure Camp Inc., and it is for kids with limb loss, and it's in Northern Virginia. If you go to the website Adventure Camp Inc., you can learn more information there. But they do a summer session.
Okay.
So, and it's actually run by some of the doctors and the prosthetists out of my local prosthetist office. And when they knew I had the book and everything, they said, hey, would you like to be a guest? And I was like, yeah, sure. So I went up there, and then they didn't do it last year, but this year they were like, hey, do you want to be a counselor? And I was like, yeah, sure. Just let me know when it is. And I'll do all this paperwork too, you know, so that's not a problem. So I'm excited. I get to do that at the end of July.
That is so exciting. Now, are you going to bring your comic books with you?
I will. And it was funny because I imagine when I was talking to the kids the first time I went, there were a lot of like, they go every year. And what I imagine is they probably didn't realize even then I had started, you know, it was a book back then, but now it's a comic. So I didn't even mention it to them because I was just having so much fun hanging out with them and everything. So yeah, I'll bring them this year. And since I'll be there for 4 days, I'll probably, oh, what do you do, Mr. Chris? And they'll be like, oh, I write comic books. So it'll come up.
That is so awesome. I love this, Chris. And I love how you've taken a situation where one could see like gloom and doom or be like, oh, what happened? Poor me. And you have spun this into a positive, affirming scenario for people. And I think that is so incredibly inspiring, not only to non-amputees, of course, but specifically to children who may deal with that, or, you know, that may be an amputee themselves. And it's really awesome how you've taken this and you've made this such a positive and fun adventure, really.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It wasn't the easiest path at all times. And,
sure.
You know, I tell people all the time, like, I'm very confident when I tell people I go to counseling every week, you know, the chance for me to talk about what's going on with myself and my leg and, you know, some of the difficulties that I don't get to talk about with a lot of people. So, you know, I credit a lot of that to the counselors that I've seen. One of my counselors retired. That's why I always say I credit it to them. But,
awesome.
Like my doctor was very adamant about that too. He was like, look, Chris, you're going to have a huge life change, you know, go to counseling, talk to somebody about it, get prepared. So I was like, okay. And, you know, it also helps to be around positive people. Like when I was telling one of my, my paintball teammates that I was going to lose my leg, I really expected like the doom and gloom from them. No, one of my friends was super, super excited. And he's like cheering. And I'm like, and his name's Lefty, and I'm like, Lefty, what's up? He's like, I'm a paraplegic ski instructor. I can show you what I do now. And I'm like, all right, cool, man. Yeah, we'll go skiing. So like we went skiing before, but I've had too many surgeries, so I haven't been able to get back since, because they tend to fall in the summer and the winter. So like I lose those seasons, but I want to go skiing again because I had so much fun the one time I got to do it. So
that is so awesome. You went skiing. Oh, I love this, Chris.
Yeah, they were telling me the real amputees, because like I said, I had a leg at the time, but I was in the Paris ski and everything. They're like, yeah, when we get the amputees out here, when they crash, some of them like to throw their leg far away and then pretend like the next skier ran them over and they lost their leg. And I'm like, oh, we could definitely do this. Yeah, this is no problem for me.
That is fantastic. I love that. And it sounds, again, you're living a productive life. You're living an active life. You're doing everything that you love doing. And I think that's an important message for people to know. And again, to break down those stigmas is that, look, you can be an amputee and you can still live a productive and fulfilling life. Go ahead.
No, I'll let you finish.
Yeah, no, and I'm saying I think that's a really important message for everyone to understand, is that you can still live you can live your life, and you can just listening to you, and I'm really glad that you're citing these examples of like how you're living life. You're doing what you love doing. You go skiing. It sounds like you're doing so much for the community, for the community, and you're doing also you're just living your life the way that you feel that you want to live it.
Exactly. I mean, I always joke with people, for a long time in my life there was kind of a pause where it was on pause, and it was about dealing with my medical problems and just the day-to-day with that. And now that we're kind of past all of that and everything, it's I go to the gym, I tell people 6 days a week for almost 2 hours a day. I like to go, I help my buddy with his comic book store that he has here in town. So I'm there a lot. And then I have my comic and everything. And I joke with people all the time. I'm like, I'm the busiest retired person you'll probably ever talk to. And, people are shocked when I'm like, oh, you're 33 and you're retired. And I'm like, yeah, I lost my leg and everything. But I tell people all the time, I'm like, this isn't, I'm constantly on the go and I can't even run. Uh-huh. It's like I'm always going, and if you see me, I'm trying to walk as fast as I can sometimes,
right?
Because I have so much going on. But it was one of those things where I recognized that I could sit back and do nothing, or I could actually get out and do something. And the police officer in me was, okay, you can have an impact on your community still. You just have to work a little harder than maybe the next person. So that's what I did. I pushed myself to try to do. I have no professional writing training. I mean, I barely finished my freshman year in college, so the fact that I was able to write a book, get a publishing contract, then transform it into a comic book, put it out myself, and still kind of figure out the social media and the business side of it, means anybody can really do it.
That's incredible.
It takes a little work, and you're going to have to use Google a lot to figure out some things, but I always joke with people, be really nice to the tax people in the business office. They're super helpful when you're nice to them. So they laugh when I come to visit. Like I show up like I was like, hey, I have a question. I have to do this, or I need this. And like, they're like, oh yeah, we know him. And one time I was there and someone's like, you only know him because he's missing a leg. And they're like, no, he's hilarious. Like you have to talk to this guy.
We know him because of his personality, not because he has a missing leg. That's awesome, Chris. I love that. So Chris, we're going to introduce some people and then I'm going to get right back to you. Sure. We want to welcome Amy, Tara, Brian, Emily, Reagan, Stephanie, Kelly, and Robin. Thank you.
Tony and Amy.
And Tony and Amy. Hey, Tony and Amy. We want to thank you guys for spending your evening with us. Again, we have Chris Barcomb, who is a author and a comic book writer. And we are just so excited to have him. So Chris, we have some questions for you.
Sure, feel free. I'm an open book, so I'll answer anything.
Excellent. Kelly asks, who are your heroes, mentors, who inspires you?
So if we're going to go fictional, we'll start with that first.
Sure.
I'm a huge Captain America fan, as you can see, and I'm particularly a fan of Bucky Cap or Bucky Barnes, the Winter Soldier, who, if you know comics, you know that he's an amputee as well. And I always, the way he took over as captain, it motivated me and it wanted me to keep going. It also gave me something to do when I got hurt. So, he's a part. But then as far as my real life heroes are, my grandparents, they played a huge part in everything and, molding me. And when my parents divorced, my grandparents on my mother's side were like surrogate parents for my brother and I. So they had a lot to do with my upbringing and things like that. And then it's, my coworkers, my colleagues, my friends, when you start to my teammates particularly did a lot too, because these are the people that I'm with all the time. And then, it's just the little interactions and the little meetings sometimes that mean a lot to me as well. And they can shape and everything like that. Like I just met a gentleman, his name's Michael, and he was at one of my signings and he was telling me how he teaches, celebrities and athletes and, people that appear in public how to sign. Because as someone who's deaf, he felt that, it wasn't offensive, but he just wished they could communicate with him. So he teaches people how to sign. So he taught me how to sign my name and what I do. And that was a huge motivating thing for me. And then, one of the first times I went and spoke publicly, I met a kid, and I don't want to get into the details on it, but when he told his story in front of his whole class, and he said he was just so afraid that everybody would laugh at him, that motivated me to keep going as well. So it's sometimes it's these little interactions. And then when I was a police officer, it was some of the people that I met in that job, whether it was the victims or even the offenders in some cases, because, I've always told people it's hard. And they're like, how does an offender, have an impact? And I'm like, because when you meet someone who's willing to steal because they need to feed somebody, that's something that you realize, that's where that moral compass line comes in. Like, is it the right thing? No, but they needed to do this. They're trying to feed somebody. And, so everybody has an impact. I grew up with, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this right, but my ex-girlfriend's mother played a huge part. She had rheumatoid arthritis. I learned a lot from, watching her and things like that about how to live with chronic pain and having a progressive nerve disease that just causes chronic pain. I was able to take a lot of things that I had seen her and transfer it to my life. So, a lot of people had a lot to do with my life, and how my upbringing and how I am even now. So.
Sure. Awesome. We have a bunch of more questions for you, Chris. While I'm waiting for the questions to come over, I'm going to ask you, just continue asking my questions I have. So what has been one of the most rewarding things that you've experienced or you've encountered in your journey of writing the comic book series?
So when I was a police officer, I had a coworker who told me, it was actually a supervisor, and he said, look, we make an investment into you as an officer. If you have an influence and you change one person's life, you're worth the investment. You've done everything you need to do. And that doesn't sound like a lot when you think about it. For some of these guys, their careers, they go so long, but it's just one person. So when I started to write the book, it was the same thing. And even when it became a comic, it was, if I can make a difference in one person's life, one positive difference, I've done all I need to do with this. And the first time I spoke was actually at a buddy's, a friend of mine from the gym school where he was a guidance counselor, and where I had said the kid that had spoke up and he had talked about everything, that meant so much to me, because I realized, this was the first time I was really out. I was promoting the book, and I already made this difference in this kid's life, that he came out and he publicly said what was, bothering him and what was causing him all these difficulties. And I just spoke at one school, and then, it just kind of kept going from there. But I was like, wow, I could stop. I've done what I need to do. I've reached a one person, but I said, no, let's keep going and let's see who else we can make an impact on, and, get the message out there, with the comics, that different is okay, and just keep going with that. So.
That's awesome. Different is okay. And I love that this is just taken off for you, Chris. It's a wonderful thing, and I absolutely love it. All right. We have some more questions here for you, Chris. Stephanie writes, her son has spina bifida and can absolutely relate to the surgeries, even at 3 years old. So thank you for that comment, Stephanie, and we're glad that you're here with us tonight. Kelly wants to ask you, do you ever experience PTSD? If so, what advice do you have for others for coping?
That is a good question. I am diagnosed, through the years of counseling. One of the things I have is they diagnosed me with PTSD. I had a very interesting police career. My nickname is Officer Death. I had been to more death scenes in 6 months than any other officer in the department combined.
Oh my goodness.
And you remember all that, and I would have nightmares and things like that. But luckily, through my counselors, one of the things they try to tell me to do is to find hobbies that aren't related to what I used to do. Mm-hmm. But I also don't watch like shows, TV shows that might trigger things like, and the ones that I do watch, if they start to, if I notice like that I'm having, I'm not sleeping well, or I'm anxious or things like that, I just turn it off. I don't watch it. And, mm-hmm. If I'm talking to somebody and they're asking me questions about, the law enforcement job, and it starts to get too much, I just say like, hey, I appreciate the questions. I want to answer them, but, I just can't answer those right now. Could we talk about something else? I try to be polite with people because I know it's, for some people, they don't meet police all the time in a very positive light. Sure. So the chance to meet, when I'm at a show or something, to get to talk to somebody, especially not in uniform, it's not as intimidating. So they have questions and they want to ask, and I want to answer them. But sometimes I have to think about what it's like for me, when I go home at the end of the day and mm-hmm. things like that. So,
mm-hmm. Of course. Yeah. Okay. Tony asked you, did you realize how many different disabilities there were before your loss? Something that you may be more tuned in to see now that maybe not before?
I did. As a police officer, again, and I hate to keep going back to the same thing, I met a lot of different people, all aspects of life, you name it. I had met people with this. One of my first interactions actually with an amputee was somebody that I had arrested.
Oh, wow.
He actually was known through the department to hide things in his prosthetic leg. And when I was in training, I had met this guy while I was on a ride along with my training officer. And he said, look, this is like a test later, in your career, because we deal with this guy all the time. But just so make sure to search his leg. He hides things in there. They're like, we found knives, we found guns, we found drugs. So he was one of my first interactions really, with an amputee. Because, I grew up with a girl who was an amputee. When I moved to Virginia, I had met her and she was friends with one of the neighbor kids. So like I had seen amputees, but I never had any real like strong interactions or anything. And then I'm dealing with this guy. So, but, then I met people that, were on the spectrum. I met people that, they had some kind of birth defect, or you would meet, or they'd been in an accident or a trauma, then you had people that were on the sides of, they had I'm trying to figure out like the best way to phrase this, but they had a lot of psychological problems. So like I was meeting all these different kinds of people and learning how to interact. And when I became, when I got hurt and everything, then I was meeting people like that, or they were dealing with me the first time. I always like to tell this story. I was coaching a paintball team in Richmond, and at the time I still had a leg, but I was wearing a huge walking brace. I walked with a cane, and I had stopped to get gas on my way home back to Harrisonburg. And I was trying to go in to pay for the gas and to get a snack after coaching all day. And these two kids, this one kid, he literally almost knocked me flat over as I'm trying to get through the parking lot, because I walked with a horrible limp, even with the cane and everything. But he almost took me out. And the next thing I know, the other kid that was there was his older brother. And he just runs up to him in the middle of this, gas station store and just starts yelling at him about, how could you do that? Did you not see that guy there? He's disabled. You were raised better than this. And I was like, I kind of walked up and I was like, look, it's okay. He was excited. It's not a big deal. I didn't fall. And he's like, no, he knows better than this. And I was like, and in my head, I was like, there's still, good people in the world. There's still good parents teaching these kids this and everything. But like those were those kinds of things that I dealt with. So like I had those interactions, but to be on the other end was completely different. So
Sure. And I think you make a good point there, is that when you're not affiliated, or when you're not, I guess you're more in tune if you're in the situation. I know for me, when I had my first daughter, Emma, I would see children, because Emma was always like this great baby. She listened. She was wonderful. And I would see other kids around me, or I'd see children that were wailing, and I'm thinking, why does that parent what's wrong with that parent? And I would pass this judgment. And now having Jacob and seeing the disconnect oftentimes with him wanting, with asking him to follow directions, Jacob can melt down, or if there's too much noise around him, he can start crying in fetal position out in the public. And I realized that, before, when I had Emma, I was not connected in with the autistic community. I was very, I was very distant. I just didn't know. And now having Jacob, I'm much more in tune, and more sensitive. So if I see a child crying, I could think, well, that could be bad parenting, or that could be a child that's trying to deal with sensory processing right now. So I love that story that you shared about the child who bumped into you, and how that parent came up. So I relate on a sense, from a parenting sense, and awesome. So we have another question for you. Sure. Chris, Brian asks, since you had time between the trauma and your amputation, do you experience phantom limb?
I do. I experience phantom limb. It's very interesting for me. I'll explain in two aspects. One, when I went in to have the amputation surgery, with the way the nerve disease that I have can spread, I had actually told the doctor, if you had to take the whole leg, just stop it from spreading. I don't want it in the other leg. Because at the time, my doctor only knew of 7 other people prior to me that had done this surgery again since the 80s, when they had kind of stopped doing amputations for this nerve problem. But he was like, if it starts to spread, this, we've got to stop. I was like, well, if you've got to take the whole leg, take the whole leg. So when I woke up, I could feel my feet at the end of the bed still. And I asked the nurse, like, am I an AK or a BK? What am I? And she's like, oh, you're below the knee. And I was like, okay, because I could still feel my leg. But after they did my first surgery, I lost the ability to feel 4 of my toes. Oh, wow. And when they did the second surgery, I got the ability to wiggle my little toe again. So I could move my big toe and my little toe. But after I had the full amputation done, I actually can now wiggle all of my toes, even though I have no toes from the phantom limb. It's very weird. And I joke with people, it even sucks because I have, my ankle was the biggest source of my nerve problem, and I still have ankle pain. So, I do mirror therapy to help with the phantom limb, but it's still one of these things. Like, now I kind of joke about it because, like, I can feel things, but on the plus side, my leg is so sensitive between the nerve damage and the phantom limb that I walk better than most amputees because I feel every step I take.
Isn't that wild?
Yeah, because I can actually feel the air, the pressure. So when, the air comes out of the socket, and I can feel this as I'm walking. So I actually walk really well. So if I was to wear pants, you would never know. And when I present, I wear pants because part of the thing is I want people to look at me and listen to me and not judge me just based on the leg. And then I take the leg off, and they're kind of shocked because I can walk around, I can kneel over, I can, talk to people. I can't run, but I put on a pretty good show as someone who's not different in any visible way.
Awesome. And you can stack and you can organize all your boxes behind you.
Yes. I can organize all the boxes behind me. Yes. This is only a small portion of the comic collection.
Right. Oh my gosh. That's amazing.
There's 33 boxes you can't see.
Oh, wow. Emily asked you, Chris, what do you want people to know about you through your comics? That's a good question, Emily.
I just want people to know that it's okay to be you. I'm a big fan. You know, I started, my grandmother was like, hey, you can't just sign your name on books. It doesn't look good. You got to have like a little line. She's a huge Stephen King fan. And I was like, okay. So I'm sitting there one day and I'm like, oh, different is okay. So that's what I signed now with my name and everything. And I was like, because that's how I looked at everybody. You know, I used to tell people I came from a small town when I was a police officer. And one of the things I told people when I left, and I even tell new officers or people going in, I'm like, treat everybody with respect. You will get a lot further treating people with respect, no matter how different they are from you, no matter, you know, size-wise, you know, male, female, you know, you name it. If you treat people with respect, you'll get a lot further with it, you know, and it's okay to be different from one another. You should learn from that. You know, I always tell people, you know, it's like with advice. I don't believe in bad advice. I believe you can learn something from every ounce of advice somebody gives you. You just have to think about it. It might not be the best advice for you, but how did they come to that conclusion? And that's why I tell people it's okay to be different. That's what makes us unique. You can't see it, but I have an asterisk tattooed on my arm. And the reason I have that is because the lead singer of the band that I got these tattoos after, he was saying that no matter how different you are and how opposite side of the, you know, that asterisk you are, you still have something common in the middle. And I got these tattoos when I was a police officer, and it made me immediately different because I was one of the first officers in this department, my department, to have visible tattoos. And they're like, people aren't going to like these things. And I'm like, but it was the exact opposite. Now everybody liked them and we would talk about them and things like that. So I always tell people different is okay. Yeah. You know, and I believe that, you know, if that's the one thing you take from it is that I'm a one-legged guy. I'm going to make you laugh. You're going to have a good time, you know, when we're talking. If you flash a comic book that I want in the background, I might try to buy it while I'm talking to you, but that's a whole nother side of it. But I want you to leave smiling. You know, when I meet people, that's my goal is even if you're asking me the worst questions and things, I want you to at least leave smiling at the end of it and know that it's okay to be whoever you are.
That is an awesome message, Chris. I love that. To be okay with whoever you are. Perfect. We have another question for you. Emily asks again, do you see yourself as a hero to others?
That's a complicated question.
Okay.
I look at all first responders and those in the military, they're all heroes. When you do it, it becomes kind of a normal thing for you. But then when you start to talk to people and they ask you like some of the things you've done and you're telling them, they're like, oh, you know, you're a hero. And if you were to ever look around my room, like I have, you know, departmental accommodations. I saved a guy's life. He was trying to jump off a bridge and kill himself. And I actually yanked him back over the bridge. Wow. There's no awards hanging up in this room for any of that stuff. I just don't, you know, that was part of my job. I knew when I got the job that this was going to happen. You know, these circumstances were going to be there. And it's just like, I tell people, when I got that job, I knew there was a chance that I might not come home at the end of the day, or I might not come home intact at the end of the day. But it was a job, it needed to be done. And I went out and I did this job. And now when I write the comics and I'm talking to people about it, you know, I learned from it. It sounds horrible to say, but like one of the publishers that I talked to was like, the thing that'll sell your comics is that you were a cop. You know, people will like that. And I was like, well, that's great, but that's just who I was. You know, I think the comics have a good message, you know, we should go with that. And they're like, we'll use that too. And I was like, really? And they're like, you're a hero. And I was like, I think there's a lot more people in the world that are doing a lot more than I am right now, that either are making an impact or have a better chance of making a bigger impact. And, you know, it's hard I don't want to call myself a hero. I don't look at it like that. I just talk to people, and if you ask me a story and I tell you, and that's what it is, cool, if that's what you think. Nice. That's, for me, you know, every person I served with was a hero. And, you know, my dad was in the Army, you know, my mom was in the Army, my grandfather was, like, all of those people, everybody's a hero. You always have that opportunity to step up and to do the right thing, no matter who you are, where you are. It's that one, that those small opportunities that appear in front of you and what you do that determine who you are. And just because I might run towards the sound of gunfire while you're running away doesn't change you from me in any way, shape, or form. It's just, this was training, and that, that was instinct sometimes with some people. Sure. But there's a lot of people, I watched a guy, he stopped breathing while we were playing paintball. He was in the field, and, you saw so many people like either kind of standing there shocked, but then there was a group of people like get in there trying to give him CPR, calling 911. Like, so you had that impact, and then people were like, oh, I didn't do anything. It's like, it's all right. You were there. You didn't, you were around. If we needed something, we could tell you. Like, that's enough. That's all we needed was that. So
right.
I hope that answered the question. I feel conflicted. I practiced for some of these questions, and that was not one of them.
That one threw you off guard. Well,
it's not something I talk about a lot.
Sure.
I don't think of myself that way.
Of course. But, I think that the very fact that, like I was saying earlier, you've taken this and you're inspiring hope, and you're creating this journey, and you're saying it's okay to be whoever you are. And that's such an important message for society to hear, Chris. Because we live in a world where everyone wants to be, we want to put people in boxes, and we want everyone to be in this picture perfect world of, you're in a category, you're in a category, you're in a category, and we're not categories. We're people. We're fluid. Exactly. And so for the fact that you've created this whole comic book series, you've taken parts of your life, you've taken parts of fiction, you brought it together, and you're inspiring people, Chris. And whether that comes from a service background, which it sounds like your family has a lot of service background, or wherever that comes from, it's a place of helping others. And it's a place of bringing light and bringing joy into a situation where some people may be stuck in. And you're taking this, and you're just making this wonderful way to reach out to others. And that's awesome.
Well, I appreciate that. I mean, I never really thought about the impact the comics could have.
Yeah.
It was just, for me also, in a way, it was therapeutic in a way, to be able to write, to be able to do something. Because when I started to write the Sam stories, a lot of people don't know this. The first 7 stories I kind of wrote while I was recovering from my surgery. So I was really, they were either done or they were being done. So like, I've just been kind of rewriting them and retelling them and changing some things. So it's, it's a little different in that aspect, but I never looked at it as like, it could be something more. It was just something really that I was doing at the time because I was stuck in bed for, however many weeks it was, so it was more of a therapy way kind of for me to still be able to do something and, just to accomplish something. Cause sometimes when I tell people all the time, they're like, oh, you're retired. And I'm like, yeah. They're like, don't you get bored? And I'm like, yeah, that's why I wrote my comics, because I had this idea. I wanted to do this. So I sat down and I did this. But yeah, I wrote the other stories to a degree to help people, but partially because I had a lot of free time and I could do this. So, it's a different kind of thing sometimes when you're like, oh, I'm going to do this today because I can, but you should be appreciative of that. That's a great thing to be able to go, okay. Cause when I talk to some of my other writer friends, they're like, oh, it must be so nice to be you. And I'm like, why? They're like, I slept like 3 hours last night, because they have a family, they go to work, and then they write at night.
Oh, wow.
Right. Home. So they're sleeping for a few hours, and I'm just like, oh, okay. Yeah. Cause I can do all this during the daytime and things like that. So,
yeah.
But I also tell people, I'm kind of like somebody with sundowners. When the evening time comes, my cognitive functions, they're not the greatest, that's part of just being in pain and kind of dealing with it all day. So like, even that's why I go to sleep so early. It's very hard for me in the evening time. So.
Right. Yeah. Well, it sounds like then you have the perfect situation for you're given what you need to do. And this is what you're doing now in life, is is inspiring others through your comic book series.
And the comic means a lot to me. I always joke to people and I tell them this, they're like, you should be proud that you got a book deal. And I was like, I am. And they're like, you don't seem happy. And I'm like, yeah, the comic means more to me. It was more what I had always envisioned for it, like the stories and everything.
Uh-huh.
And like to see the comic, to be able to work with Yarfei, who's the artist on the book, it's become so much more. And then to be able to reach out and to like meet some of the people that I idolize in comics and to get input from them and, things like that means a lot to me. And then I'm also kind of with my own community. Like, I don't read books anymore. My nerve problem, I can't focus long enough to read a book anymore.
Okay.
I get too frustrated because I can't accomplish anything. But comics are great because when my nerve problem kicks in or I'm in a lot of pain, I can still see the pictures and finish the story.
Okay.
So that's why comics, I really enjoy them. And that's why I tell people, don't just judge it as a comic book, because there is something you can gain from that, especially if you're someone that can't read or doesn't read well.
Sure.
The pictures, they allow you to still feel like you're accomplishing something and learning something.
Right.
But I kind of forgot where I was going on that little tangent. So,
well,
I told you I'll be honest about anything. So
I appreciate that. And I know our audience appreciates that too, Chris. Tony asks you, how far out have you thought through the story arc of the Superior Sam, or do you focus issue to issue?
So I write whenever I feel motivated. Now, I'm always working on something, but to give you an idea how far ahead I am, the scripts are done for the last 2 issues in kind of volume 1. I have written synopsis. I've written scripts for a follow-up miniseries, which is 3 issues. And then I've written 3 additional bonus issues, and I have about a half a dozen other little like synopsises written for other separate stories. So I'm way ahead, significantly far. And that's difficult to be, because one of the things I learned from having a book deal from that editor was you don't want to constantly be rereading and writing what you're doing, because you'll want to change it. And you don't want to always do that, especially if you know you got it. You don't want to keep making those changes. So for me, I've written so far ahead that when I go back and read those stories, when it's time to like start actually working on that issue, I have to be careful not to want to make too many changes. But I told a lot of people the Sam story was going to originally be 6 issues. However, after an encounter with the gentleman, I decided I really wanted to tell this story. And it also ties into my girlfriend's family, because I'm introducing a deaf character in the series. Oh. And I was like, I want to do this, and I don't want to do this as a one-shot. I want it to be part of the story. So we're going to have to change some things. So I had to kind of rewrite the ending of issue 5, because this is going to be issue 6 now. And then issue 7 will be kind of the conclusion to this portion of Sam.
Okay.
So, but no, I'm way ahead, in terms, but from what I know of comic writers, that's a great thing to be too.
Yeah.
Because you always want to be ahead in case something changes. So.
Of course, absolutely. And so I'm assuming, Chris, that comics has always been a part of your life. Is that right? Like, have you just?
I remember as a kid going, like, when I lived with my dad, I would walk to 7-Eleven and I would buy comic books from the 7-Eleven. And I remember liking to read and things like that, but I read a lot more books. And then it's funny because every collector I talk to talks about this. It's like, if you were a boy, then you met girls and comics weren't cool. You did sports and things like that. So like all the childish things kind of went away except for Star Wars. That's kind of always been there. And then I still kind of read comics when I would see them here and there and things like that. But it really was my injury that got me back into comic collecting, because I'm an independent person. And even though I played like a team sport and things like that, paintball to a degree was independent. But when I got hurt, I don't know who it was, but they got me a copy of Captain America: The Winter Soldier in the collected edition for one of my surgeries. And I read it while I was there. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. And then I actually started trying to find the rest of the story. I wasn't sure if you were there.
Yeah, no, I'm here. I'm listening. Yeah, yeah.
So I wanted to find the rest of the books in the series, and whereas people had to, kind of help me around, drive me sometimes and things, I was able to go out in the daytime because, there's not as much traffic, and I would drive to different comic shops and I would look for these books, but I could do this on my own. And this kind of became this little adventure for me to go to these different stores and to be hunting for these books and to have to go through all the boxes and talk to people and deal with either the success or the not success. But I remember telling somebody, I remember going to the paintball fields and kind of being at complete peace with everything. We joked in paintball that when you get to the field, nothing else matters. So, but I remember I found this $15 comic in a 50-cent box. And it was Captain America Comics Volume 1 from the Winter Soldier story run. And I was so excited. But and when I got up there, I was like, hey, and the guy's like, oh, did you find this in the 50-cent box? And he's like, yeah, this shouldn't be 50 cents, but since you found it, I'll give it to you. And then,
wow.
Then I went back and found 2 more books in the same 50-cent boxes that were like $15 and $30 books. So I hit this store up a lot for a while, but this became something for me to do on my own, but also it gave me something to work towards. Like when I was in the hospital, it was, okay, when I get out of the hospital, I have to wait 2 weeks, but then I can go back to the comic store and to do this. But this is also how I met my friends when I lived in Harrisonburg. When we moved here, I was, I'd lived in Charlottesville my whole life. And I moved to Harrisonburg with my girlfriend who's going to grad school. So I have, one of my best friends here with me, but I didn't know anybody else. And when we talk about the cop thing, I actually met one of my best friends because I thought his store was being robbed because I saw comics on the new sign that had gone up on the shopping center. And I was like, I don't know this comic shop. I know all the stores in this town, where I live, and there's not a comic book store. So I stopped and the door's open, the lights are off. There's a money bag sitting on the counter and there's a backlight on. And I'm like, so I'm just like, hello, and they're like, oh yeah. So I met like one of my best friends that way. So like comics gave me this whole other life. Plus I learned, a lot of people don't realize this, but people with disabilities in comic books are the heroes.
Yeah.
If you really look at comic books, being different is a good thing. Having a disability makes you can be a hero. Amputees are very prominent people in the comic book world. So these were people that I could look at and I could idolize in a way because they didn't let their disability stop them or being different stop them from still trying. Plus, and I joke with people, the thing with Captain America I like is he has a moral code, and even though it might be outdated, he knows that it's right, and that's what he goes off of, even if it's against what the popular group might be. So comics, they mean a lot to me, and this was a lot of therapy in here too. I mean, this collection was a lot of me going out, learning how to walk, learning how to drive again, learning how to socialize and to deal with pain. This is a lot of therapy in this room when you see all this stuff too.
Sure. Yeah. I want to apologize, Chris, when that pause that you experienced there, my husband was leaving because my son Jacob was screaming upstairs. So I was distracted for a second of what he was doing. I was trying to figure out what was going on.
I just wasn't sure if like the screen froze. I was like, oh, maybe nobody could hear me. I don't want to talk to myself more than I usually.
No. You're doing great. You're doing great. Okay. So Amy asks you, Chris, how as a parent of young kids to approach people with different abilities if they have questions?
It's tricky. There are people with disabilities that don't like to talk about it. They'll be very off-putting. And I've met a lot of people like that, and it's very difficult, especially when you're just curious and you want to learn more. I have an open book policy. If you see me, I will, answer any questions you have. If you're a little child, and it's the same thing as when I was a police officer, I don't try to scare you. So like when we were police officers, we didn't like when people said they're going to take you to jail. Because when they're lost, we want them to come to us. When you're scaring them, that's not helping us do our jobs. And it's the same thing. I'm not going to take my leg off and just shake it at you and things like that. Right. I'm going to show you and I'm going to let you look at it. And if you want to touch it, feel free. I mean, I'll take it off. But, it's the same thing when I speak, and I'm presenting. If there's one kid in the crowd that is scared of me being an amputee, the leg goes right back on, and I don't take it off anymore because I'm not trying to traumatize anybody. But the advice I could give you would be if they're staring or they're pointing, one, that person's probably had that happen before. You can kind of gauge by their reaction what to do. Me, I'm the kind of person, if you point and stare too long, I'll actually just walk up to you and start talking to you. That was actually something that I taught myself to do because I got tired of people pointing and staring sometimes or making fun of how I walked. So that was like a thing that I started to do. But be nice about it. If you have a question, you can ask, like, hey, do you mind if they ask you a question, or will you talk about? But kids are great because they'll just be honest with you about it.
Sure.
Like a lot of kids call my leg the robot leg, and I'm perfectly fine with that, But when I'm trying to, like, they ask me how that I got my leg, that's hard to explain. So I might, say, oh, I tripped and fell, which is true. It's just you're missing 9 years of my life in that little statement. But
right,
my advice would be is to be courteous to that person, respectful of their decisions one way or another. And then if they're, your child, you may be more curious, long after they've lost interest, kind of keep that in mind too. I don't mind talking to people in Target for 3 hours. I've done this, but that's 3 hours. I only went for something. And, a lot of times if I have something in my basket, it's like, well, this was frozen. It's not anymore. So,
right.
Just be curious and be, considerate of that person and the time and things like that. I make it easy for people. I can hand you a business card and go, here, check out my comic. It explains everything that, kind of goes on with me. And then if you have questions, shoot me an email or, come see me at an event or, anything like that. And I'm glad to answer questions or talk to you more and things like that. So, but that's the best advice I can give you on that one, is to just kind of go with the flow on the situation.
Feel it out for each person.
And don't set your bar too high. Some people just talking about what's wrong with them is a very big deal. So getting the detail and the long stories, that, that's something that some people aren't comfortable with. So don't get mad if you don't get what you're looking for. So.
Absolutely. Robin asked you, Chris, about what's a good age range for your comics?
So I haven't had them tested. I know there's a company where you can submit it to and they can test it. And I know it's categorized as all ages. I joke with people a lot that I've met 5-year-olds that have been able to read it all the way up to, grown adults. The story is set up basically where they're designed to be introductions to reading comics. So they do scale up in difficulty as you read in the series, but they're designed to allow you to learn how to read comics, like which way the panels work. There's no tricky splash pages and things like that. And I try to use very simple words. There's no blood, there's no gore. I tell people it is a superhero comic, so there's violence, but you have to use your imagination, kind of like, oh, someone might have hit somebody, but you're not going to see the hit. You might see the reaction from it. So I always tell people they can be shown to, really young kids, but also you as the parent has to make the decision what's appropriate for your child. I always tell people all the time, I used to read super violent comics. When I started reading, it was, Hulk and Spawn and things like that. So those were already there. So it's up to you as that parent to make that decision. But when I'm telling you that the comic is all ages, know that there's no profanity. There's no, real simulated violence. There's no blood. You're not going to see things, but the stories do sometimes have a different message. A lot of people tell me the first story is kind of sad when you learn about Sam and how he becomes an amputee. And there's an issue I was explaining to somebody coming up. It's issue 7, where there's a death in the issue, not of a main character or anything. I don't want people to think I'm going to kill off my character, but part of who he is shaped by this person's death in his life. And I talk about grief and counseling and things like that, because every one of the comics has a message to them. So, and someone's like, how do you talk about that with kids? And I was like, you have to be very careful with it. But I also like to think that each story is its own separate story. So if you don't think your child is ready for this story, you don't have to get that story, or you can get it and they just don't read it yet. But I like to say they're all ages, and I like to say really from 5 to 9 is where I kind of put the stories genuinely.
Okay, excellent. So 5 to 9.
Normally,
all you parents out there that are wondering, there you go.
If your child can't read, me and Yarfei worked very hard to make sure the pictures tell the story well enough still.
Excellent. That's wonderful. Tracy asked you, Chris, is there going to be a sidekick for Sam, a team?
So I'm just trying to find something.
Yeah.
I can make this a little, so if you've not looked at Sam or you've not read it, Sam actually, his best friend is Billy. I don't know if you can see this.
I can see it, yeah.
There's Billy. That's Viva. That's Viva Fox. And they're actually all heroes. And
they're adorable too.
The story kind of builds up. Like Sam has this, the school has more heroes than you would think in it. So like in the first story, you meet Sam. In the second story, Billy becomes a hero. In the fourth story, Viva is introduced. And then actually there's a couple more other heroes as well. There's going to be Super Silas, who will be on the cover of the next issue. And then there's also Fast Freddy. And Freddy is the double amputee that I mentioned early in this. So, but no, I like to add different heroes and kind of grow Sam's little world in there. But they're all their own little team. So, but I always tell people the stories are not connected, but if you want to know, like, is this character, where did they come from? You have to go back to read the story that introduced that character, but you don't necessarily need to read that issue to get the story that you got now. So,
gotcha.
But yes, there are more heroes, and it is like this whole little school of heroes. There's actually there's a panel that'll be in issue 7 where there'll be a lineup between the bullies at the school and all of the heroes at the school. And you'll see all the names of at least the ones that are in there now, but I'm already working on heroes that are into the next portion of the story as well. So
very awesome. Very awesome. Emily asks you, Chris, what advice do you have for others who want to write comics?
To just start small. Don't expect the world and to know how to do it right the first time. It's a trial by error thing, and you have to learn to be patient as well. For me, like I said, I had no formal training in this or anything. I knew how to tell a story because when I was a police officer, they taught us storytelling. So I had that to fall on, but I didn't know how to write a script. When I actually wrote the first story, I wrote it like just as a police report. And then I had to go back through and to break it down into like images and script, So like I would buy comic books that had like the writer's notes and things like that so I could learn how to write. And then it becomes a decision of, are you going to try to shop this around? The literary world is very strict. It's not one of these easy things that you can just kind of walk into and do it your way and you're going to get in. It's very formal. So when they tell you, like, you need to be able to follow directions. So if they say, we only want, 50 words, this font, this spacing, this layout, they want that, or they're not even going to read what you write. The one example I know of in like the literary world is J.K. Rowling, who, hand wrote the story and publishers were passing on it left and right because she couldn't follow directions. And it was one guy that actually read it that, led you to Harry Potter and everything. But I mean, that's one of those few times you hear about that. And then in the comic world, it's not as big as the book world. So it's even smaller. So when they're giving you these directions, you really want to go for listen to these directions and not to get frustrated with it. Cause I tell people all the time, I met somebody who had told me they had 1,500 rejection letters. They had counted. And I was like, oh, I wrote 200 and I only heard back from 75, but I got published on the 75th. So like you have to get used to that rejection. And then you have to get used to the idea of being able to take criticism and to how to improve, because when someone's talking to you and they're giving you input or feedback on something, or they're like, oh, I don't understand this, that's your audience to a degree. So if this person doesn't understand it, does the next person not understand it? But you also have to be able to say to yourself, I'm okay with this. This is my story and I want it to be like this. And I've done that a few times where someone's like, this doesn't make sense to me. And I'm like, but it makes sense to me. And I understand this and I'll explain it if I have to every person.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
But it's a patient thing. It's a very patient thing.
Yeah. Sounds like a long process, Chris, to
it is
put yourself out there. And
it's not, and that's the other thing too. We didn't even get to the going to events, never selling a single thing, you know, kind of the awkward, like waving at people that walk past and nobody pays it. Like we didn't even get to the public side of it. We're only at the what you can do from your house side of things. We're not at the you've got to talk to people over the phone who basically, you know, and then there's this whole stigma too of like you're rich. I don't think people realize there is, you know, for me, I make nothing off of this comic book. Everything I make goes literally into printing the next issue or to paying RFA who actually gets paid. I make no money off of this. I live off my retirement. When I wrote the book, I made no money off the book. Mm-hmm. So, and then a lot of people don't know the average book, and the comic industry is different. I always try to explain to people, when you meet like someone who's like, oh, I sold 100,000 copies of my first book. There are some comic writers that sell that of each comic that comes out every month.
Oh, wow.
So like, that's some math that you have to think about. Like, okay, you did that once every year or two. I do that every other month. So like that's some numbers you have to think about, but the average book only sells 5,000 copies in its lifetime.
Okay.
And
that's good to know.
Average. So you're, you know, like for me, when my book first came out, I sold 600 copies. Mm-hmm. I've already sold more than that of the first issue of the comic. So like there's a huge difference there. Plus I felt better about the comic than I did this. So I always tell people, you know, I had a coach who told me it's okay to sell out. So like when the publishing contract came around, I wasn't very comfortable with some things in the contract, but I remember what this coach said, and he's like, it's okay to sell out sometimes, because I realized that if I could get the message out there, that was the end goal. And this was going to allow me to do that. But it's a big patience thing. And then it's putting yourself out there as well is that second challenge. Mm-hmm. You know, if you're someone who's very reclusive, it might be very hard because a lot of this is going out, putting yourself out there, being able to accept yourself if you sell nothing at the end of the day, and then still being okay with that to keep going for the next thing. So
absolutely. Well, good perseverance. And we have yet another question for you, Chris. Sure. Emily asks, what advice? Oh wait, I'm so sorry, Chris. I think I already asked that question. I apologize. I was asking about I'm sorry. But I have another question. We want to know where can we meet you, Chris, and where are your to get one of your books, and what is your lineup for 2018?
So you can purchase any of the comics through my website, which is chrisbarcombauthor.com. There's a store on there. You can also purchase them. There's a few stores that carry it. The local comic shop, The Secret Lair, carries it. Big Planet, which is in Northern Virginia, carries it. Telegraph Comics in Charlottesville carries it. It's also available digitally through Comixology, Comics X Central. And then additionally, Azami and I talked about this a couple weeks ago. It's available. The first 2 issues are available for free. You could always get issue 1 for free off my website. But when we redid the website, we took that away because it's now the first 2 issues are available for free on Tapas and Webtoon, which are comic, you know, online digital comic reading sites where you don't need a subscription or anything. You can just go on these sites and read these. And if you're in the store, there's a link that takes you right to this. So the comic is not, like I said, it's not a money motivated thing. If the story will help you, I will give it to you for free. So you can definitely just go to that store page on there and you'll see all the links to everything. So, but then additionally, my schedule for 2018, it's also on there as well. I always try to list my schedule and everything, but the events I have left I'll be at Tricon in West Virginia on June 2nd. And this is actually my first out of state like Comic-Con going to. So, and then I will be at I believe it's either the Fredericksburg Book Festival or Big Lit Comic Con. I don't have anything handy that I can see this. I didn't write this
Okay,
part down.
no
You
problem.
got me on a shock on this one. And then I will be at Hampton Comic Con and Virginia Comic Con again. So I have 5 events left for 2018. They're
Excellent.
currently posted. Will I add more events? If you ask me to come speak somewhere, or, you know, I get a chance and I can make an event, I want to. So,
Perfect.
you know, it kind of fluctuates, but everything can be found on the website. So that's
Wonderful.
where I'll be, where to purchase it. So
Awesome. Do you have any plans? Are you coming to Richmond anytime?
so my next event in Richmond that I know scheduled confirm is in December.
In December.
It's my last event of the year.
Okay, excellent.
I can almost guarantee that I am not coming back doing any events from like December, 18th through like early January.
Right.
Christmas, man. So
I totally understand that.
I will be dealing with that stuff. But no, I actually do. I like to kind of drive around and like just travel around and things like that. So even if I'm not at an event, there is a chance where you might, if you looked on like my Instagram, I might post that I'm like at a Comic-Con.
Sure.
So like Virginia Comic-Con has an event in October that I've gone to every year since losing my leg, because it's one of the first events I can make it to. So there's a chance I might go back to that show and just be there as like a guest. And if you saw me, I always carry a box of books with me. So that's the other thing too. If you see me, there's a better than likely chance I have comics with me. You just have to ask.
Nice.
I carry this thing with me everywhere. I bring it to all my doctor's visits. I have it every morning with me at the gym. I joke with people. If you never can, you always lose a sale if you're not prepared. Like, and I'm not about the sales, but I'm always about spreading the word. So I carry this box with me everywhere. So, excellent. And then if you're in Harrisonburg, Virginia, and you stop by the Secret Lair Comics, I am almost always there on a day it is open. Or if I'm not there, they can text me, and if I can, I will show up. And I have done this before. If it's a chance to meet somebody that can help them and to make a difference, I'm all for it. So I don't mind, driving, across town to go over there. So
excellent. Well, there you go, guys. Chris, is there anything else that I haven't covered or we haven't covered in this conversation that you want to discuss or you want to share?
Well, if you give me a chance, I'd love to do, like I said, I'm learning sign language. So I would love to maybe just show this, what I've learned. So if somebody else wants to try this, they can. So
excellent. Go for it.
So I'm going to say, hi, my name is Chris.
Okay.
And then I write superhero books because I don't have a word for comic yet.
All right.
So let's see if I can do this. So it's hi, my name I write superhero books. And Michael from Famous Flying Hands taught me how to do this. So I'm learning I'm learning other signs, but it's been something that I've wanted to try to learn, is to learn another foreign language, and sign language has been one of them. So I'm very excited to be able to kind of learn something and to be able to reach people, that I might not have been able to spoke to before. So
yeah, absolutely. I love that, Chris. That's awesome. And thanks for doing that. That was a fun demonstration.
I was practicing all day. I was like, oh, if I get the chance, I want to do this because he explained it to me. I don't know if anybody out here is hearing impaired, watching this in subtitle, if it's even available and stuff, but I at least wanted to be able to say that I could do this. So
I love it. Thank you for doing that.
So,
that was
you're
awesome.
Welcome. I'll get critiqued on this later if he's watching. Like, if I got it right.
That's great. Well, Chris, this wraps up our Movement Monday for today. Again, thank you so much for being part of the show. And we're going to have you pick a number for our drawing tonight for the Target gift card. Brian, what's the numbers?
1 in 100.
1 in 100, Chris.
So thank you for having me. I'm going to pick number 42.
Number 42, Brian. All right. Drum roll.
The reason I picked 42 is that was my batch number.
So it's significant to you. It has meaning.
Yes. I always use 42. Not in any of my
Perfect.
passwords or anything.
Play
Not
the
that
lotto,
easy.
use the 42.
I don't do the lottery. That doesn't work out for me. I don't have that kind of luck.
We don't do lottery either, Chris. All right, Amy Coulard, you have won our gift card tonight. Congratulations, Amy.
Well, congrats, Amy.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you know the Coulards. You met them when you were here.
Yes. I assume this is Tim. I'm not good with names.
No, that's
I'm
okay.
Really not good with. I've met too many people from all over that names. I do faces really well.
Okay.
Like if I've seen you and talked to you, I will never forget. But your name, that is not my thing.
I understand that.
I have people that make little rhymes up so I remember their names, and I'm like, okay.
Her son doesn't hold his leg.
What's that?
Her son got to hold his leg.
Oh, Amy said her son got to hold your leg.
Yes. Yeah,
Awesome.
It's very popular. If you ever do see me at a show, and you were dressed up as Rocket Raccoon from Guardians of the Galaxy, you're more than welcome to come to my booth and take a picture with my prosthetic leg.
Nice.
I just ask that you not steal it.
Oh.
Because if you remember, he steals prostheses. So, but yeah, I offer this as a free prop to make your costume complete.
Love it.
Have the leg.
That's great. Well, that's good to know. So if you are at one of the Comic Cons and you are dressed up like that, then go on over.
Yeah, it's a great prop. People saw me doing this at the they saw me, and I saw this little kid dressed as Rocket, and they're like looking at me, and they pointed at the leg, and I'm like, oh yeah, sure. And like, I handed, and they're like, and at the time I was wearing a t-shirt that actually said it had Rocket on it, and it had the something about his leg and everything. There's a picture on my website that shows me wearing it, and I was like, it's all the irony of the shirt. I think the shirt said it all. So,
Nice.
But yeah, if you're dressed as Rocket and you want a great prop, I have a prosthetic leg you can take a picture with. I joke all the time. My legs are more popular than I am.
Right. That's so funny. Well, I saw a picture of your leg, and you have if I remember correctly, you have Captain America's symbol on there?
So I have 3 different Captain America legs.
Oh, okay.
This is my Cap 100 leg.
Okay.
This is the Jack Kirby leg. The leg nobody gets to see is this leg. It used to come all the time, but this is my Alex Ross leg.
Oh, nice.
And I got to meet Alex Ross, which is why I don't bring it, and he signed the leg.
Oh, that's fantastic.
And then
That's just kind of your sacred leg.
Yeah, and they can't do anything to protect the signature without damaging it.
Got it.
Like they can't clear it or anything. So I stopped bringing it out.
Right.
But I need to do like a really good video and pictures of it. Like,
there you go.
If you ask me, I pull up my Instagram where I have pictures of it all the time and show people at shows. And then I don't think you can see it, but it's way in the back. There's another Captain America Winter Soldier leg, which was actually based off of the Cap number 14 cover. But all of my legs are Captain America.
That's okay. So all the legs are Captain America.
Yeah. I do one thing and I do it big.
There you go. That's awesome. Well, Chris, thank you so much again for being on here tonight. It was such a treat to have you on our show and to learn more about your comic work and what you're doing. And I hope that we're going to meet in person in the near future because you do some great stuff, Chris.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And you do a lot too. You know, when I'd heard about this from Tim, I was like, oh, I've got to look in. Tony.
Tony, yeah.
I told you, I'm bad with names.
No, that's okay.
Didn't lie. But when I started to look at it, I was like, I never actually thought about this. This is a really good thing. She's introducing all of these different people that can make a difference for somebody else. And again, if you only help one person, that's all that matters.
That's right.
It's all worth it. So
thank you.
Thank you for what you do with this and everything. I've enjoyed seeing all the updates and everything. So
yeah, good. Yeah, we had a really fun audience tonight. So thank you everyone who participated and who was part of this and who was engaged and for all your wonderful questions. We had a great show tonight. Next week, we will have no shows, being the Labor Day weekend, but we will resume back in June again. So thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Good night. All right. Well, Chris, thanks